But before we get into all that, could you please tell our listeners and followers a little bit about your military service?
Sure, sure. Well, I first, I applied to be in the military when I was in high school. An ROTC scholarship seemed like the only way that I could afford college. This was back in the late 80s during the Reagan build-up years. There were more Naval Academy spots, ROTC scholarships available. This is really before a lot of the GI Bill, the present GI Bill started to take effect. So it was a great program. I was accepted to that program and then applied to colleges and was accepted to Harvard. So luckily I found somebody to pay the bill, and that was good old Uncle Sam. So I'm always a patriot, but I was even more patriotic at that moment. And, I left a blue collar neighborhood in Los Angeles County. They'd never sent a student out of my high school in 50 years to Harvard. And I don't think any ROTC scholarships before my year either in that 50 years. So it was new. And I guess that's where I learned how to be an entrepreneur, was figuring out how to fund my college experience. It was only maybe the second time I got on a plane was when I got on a plane to go back east to Boston from LA for school. So a lot of new things. I really valued it. I loved the military.
I didn't even know Harvard had an ROTC program.
They don't actually. We had to take a bus in the snow down to MIT, which was a couple miles down the road, and then that closed down because there were so few students. So we had to take it across the river to Boston University. There weren't too many Harvard folks. This school really is kind of liberal and doesn't really favor it that much. Most of their parents have money, but not mine.
What was it like after you graduated from Harvard and you went into the Navy as a surface warfare officer? Where was your first duty station, and how was your military experience and your military journey and then your military transition?
Yeah, it was. I had a great experience. Because I got my scholarship during the Reagan buildup years. When I graduated in '93, after the Cold War ended, literally, they had a program for us to do other kinds of service for up to 1 year. So what I chose to do to delay my entry into active duty was teach high school in New York City public schools for a year and really give back in a totally different way, but also sort of the same patriotic mindset. I wanted to help underprivileged students in the public schools. It's ironic that I was a firefighter in the Navy on board a ship, but I saw more fires in the school trash cans when I was in New York City. I didn't have a team behind me necessarily to help out. But, it was good leadership training, being 22 and being a school teacher for a year. And in a lot of ways, as a junior officer, that's what you're doing. You have 18-year-old to 25-year-old kids, right out of high school. They need some direction. They need some leadership. And you've got to teach them things and motivate them and help and make sure they succeed, help them win. That helped prepare me. When I started active duty, then a year later, after the school year ended, I went to Newport, Rhode Island for Surface Warfare Officers training. I think that was about 9 months. Rhode Island was beautiful. A lot of people stopped there for War College and whatnot. It was close to Boston, where I went to undergrad. But, I'm a California person. So I longed for San Diego, which is close to where I grew up and where I live now, and couldn't wait to get stationed on a destroyer out of San Diego. I purposely chose what they said and what turned out to be the hardest junior officer job on the ship, which was to be the damage control assistant and the officer in charge of all the firefighting, all the welders, all the repair crew, damage control. It was emergency response 24/7 and very hands-on physical job, but I had fun. I grew up kind of doing some of that stuff, more so than most Harvard grads, and I liked the difference. I wanted to get a real Navy experience out of it, not a Pentagon junior officer carrying papers experience. So jumped on a ship, was in charge of a division of welders and damage controlmen and about 30 people, and did really well. We had a lot of fun, and nobody died or got seriously injured in my 2-year tour. I was really proud of that. That was on my mind 24/7. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize that in the Navy, the ships often go out to sea for weeks or months at a time, and you're on them and you work around the clock. Sometimes 6 hours on, 6 hours off. Sleeping's hard. And then in your downtime, it's not like you can sleep most of the time. You have your paperwork to do and your general administration. You're not just standing watch with binoculars on the bridge like some people envision. Or for me, it was mostly in an engineering plant, watching dials and power plants, making sure the engines were running all the time while the guys up top were were driving it to make sure we didn't hit anything. So I had a lot of independence and learned a lot of hands-on engineering and some welding and some repair, and just had a wonderful adventure for 2 years. Drove through the Panama Canal back when it was owned by us, saw the South America on both sides, the Atlantic and the Pacific, and then went up to Everett, Washington by Seattle. Got to see that for a few months before I got out, and then went on to grad school because I knew I wanted to be a business person, liked entrepreneurial things, and decided to go to Stanford because that was where it was at. You could be an entrepreneur. I was in California. The weather was good. So it sounded like the perfect place for me to start what would then be my entrepreneurial career.
It's a relatively smooth transition. You knew exactly what you wanted to do after the military portion, and a very smooth transition. Were you able to leverage any more benefits from the Navy when you transitioned out and went to Stanford?
I